Hello there, people of the internet. I made a bolt-action rifle military surplus tier list not too terribly long ago, and by that I mean I literally just made it. And now I want to go ahead and do a semi-auto military surplus rifle tier list, just basically for fun. These are completely my opinion. If you think that something else belongs somewhere on the list, then by all means you go ahead and you choose to stick whatever it is that you want, wherever it is that you want to put it. Please don't take that sentence out of context. I really gotta start watching what I say. So we're gonna go ahead and exclude like parts kits or like the AR and the AK specifically, just because there's so many different variations of those out there, and both of those would end up on the A tier list anyway, and we would just be going over all sorts of variants of those particular rifles. So we're gonna go ahead and just kind of exclude those, and we're going to look more at what people would think about whenever they're thinking about your military surplus semi-auto rifles. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and start with like the lower tier things. We're going to have a look at this. This is an 8mm Mauser Hakim rifle. I would go ahead and put the 6.5 Lumen. I have no idea if I pronounced that correctly. You'll have to forgive me. I am an English speaker, and I don't know what an L and a J combined sounds like. So I'm going to go ahead and classify both of these as a C tier rifle. Well, I don't know about Lumen, but the Hakim right here, this does have an adjustable gas system on it, so you can adjust your gas system to be able to run pretty much whatever kind of 8mm Mauser ammunition it is that you have available. I go ahead and I run mine as low as possible to try and conserve that 8mm Mauser brass. The reason why I'm placing this on C tier is because it's super unusual. This right here is one of those rifles where if you don't really know what to look for and what to expect, like you could get yourself hurt with something like this. So normally with a rifle we have a charging handle that we pull back and let go forward, and that's by all accounts what normally is supposed to happen, versus something like this. You actually take this slide on the receiver and you push it forward, and that opens up the rear of the receiver, and you have like all your fire control bits right there that are ready to get a bunch of mud and whatnot inside of them. And you have to adjust your safety to be at a certain spot. Normally it would be a little bit easier, but this particular safety is a little messed up. Then you bring your slide assembly to the rear, and you can actually load from stripper clips into your magazine using your stripper clip guide right here. And it's super sketchy and not great. And then after you're done with that, flip your safety and the bolt goes home. Normally you might have to pull the slide assembly back a little bit more to make it actually go home, but long story short, it's a really unusual system, and if you don't know what you're looking at, then odds are you're not going to be able to effectively run this system. But the ammo is available. If you know how to use it, then it could be a good rifle. That's why I went ahead and stuck it at C tier versus something like D tier. 8mm Mauser is a fantastic cartridge. It is honestly my favorite full power rifle cartridge. We're going to go ahead and classify like the Gewehr 41 and the Gewehr 43 in that same C tier category, just because they tend to be overgassed and overcomplicated and really weird. Like anyone who's messed with the Gewehr 41s with like that bolt action system in a semi-auto rifle, it's a very unusual system, a very unusual setup. And the Gewehr 43s are so overgassed that they will literally beat themselves to death, so you got to go through and update the gas system on those, and it's just not all that great of a setup. So now let's go ahead and look at this right here. This is a French Moss 4956 rifle, chambered in 7.5 French. I would go ahead and classify this one as a C tier. No, I'm going to go ahead and classify this one as a B tier, just because there's not a whole lot that you have to do with this rifle. 7.5 French, basically all 7.5 French will run through this rifle. It's a direct impingement system. It's not going to beat itself to death, but it's also got external magazines, which is fantastic if you want to shell out the money to be able to get yourself more magazines. But that makes reloading a lot easier than, say, stuffing 2 5-round stripper clips into a Hakim. And just because of that, along with the significantly, I don't want to call it necessarily an updated cartridge or a better cartridge or anything like that, but it's a 30 caliber cartridge that is basically ballistically similar to the 308 round, which is still used to this day. It's a really, really good cartridge. I don't necessarily want to call it superior to 8mm Mauser because I like 8mm Mauser better, but it's a shorter cartridge. It's a 30 caliber cartridge. It tends to fire lighter weight bullets than 8mm Mauser. They tend to travel not as fast and have not as much recoil. It's not quite an intermediate cartridge in comparison to, say, 8mm Mauser or 30-06 or something like that. But it's not quite up there in terms of the power of what those bigger cartridges can handle. It's a battle rifle, don't get me wrong, but it's a controllable rifle. It's an easy to use rifle. The mechanics on the rifle are extraordinarily simple. There's really not anything to mess up here. Right here's your magazine latch to be able to pull your mag out and stick a new one in. And then you have a charging handle right here, unlike something like the Hakim where you have to know what it is that you're doing in order to actually use the thing. These are great, great little rifles, but just because of that 7.5 French, although yes, it is a fantastic cartridge, it's expensive, it's hard to find. Whenever you do find like surplus stuff, a lot of times it's not usable. You can break it down and use it as components, but there's just a lot that goes into shooting 7.5 French. So just because of those categories, I'm going to go ahead and throw this into a B tier, just because if you do have the ammunition and the magazines and the weights to make this thing run, something like this can absolutely step up in a modern day period to be able to handle a good portion of what most civilians would ever need to handle. Maybe not necessarily on a peer-to-peer battlefield where you got the most advanced technology known to man, but as a U.S. civilian, something like that, dude, that will absolutely do pretty much anything I would ever need a rifle to be able to do. All right, up next on the list, we're going to go ahead and look at an M1 Carbine, however it is you feel like pronouncing that one as well. It's about as powerful as a 357 Magnum. There's a little bit more that goes into it. It's lighter weight bullets going a little bit faster, but we're going to go ahead and say it's about as powerful as a 357 Magnum. These right here were designed to be capable out to about 300 yards, and for all intents and purposes they are. They're not sniper rifles. They're not 30-06 rifles. They're not overwhelmingly powerful rifles. What they are is they are a lightweight, handy little, essentially PCC that you can use to handle most of what anyone would ever need to handle. I wouldn't take it big game hunting by any stretch of the imagination, but having something like this as like a truck gun or just a personal defense weapon in general would be a really good option. They are nice and small. Like, this is a tiny little package for the time period where this came out, and they're super lightweight. I think that this one right here comes in at like 6.5 pounds or something like that. The ammunition is a little bit more on the expensive side. It's like 75 cents per shot, and at that, you know, price, you're better off getting like, say, 308 if you want something with more power. But for what these things are, they're pretty gosh darn good. I love the sights on them. The aperture sights are just fantastic, and they make hitting things out to 300 yards not that difficult. Again, these are not full-powered rifles. You're firing essentially a pistol cartridge, but if you don't push these beyond what it is that they were essentially designed to be able to do, then they can be quite good rifles. I'd go ahead and I would classify these as a B-tier gun. The only reason why I'm not making them A tier is because the ammunition, again, is not all that powerful. I get it. It's powerful enough to handle most of the things, but it's also expensive, and with the amount of money you're spending on the ammo for the amount of power that you're getting from the platform itself, it just doesn't lend itself to me being able to classify these as A tier. On top of that, magazines tend to be a little bit finicky. There's certain issues with these guns, like you can't take apart the gas system without replacing the locking nut on the little piston that's inside that thing. Everything has to be essentially perfect on this thing in order to get it to actually run reliably, and even then they don't necessarily always run all that reliably. But they're good guns for what they are. So that is our B tier gun. Let's go ahead and look at a clear A tier winner, the M1 Garand, or Garand, however it is you want to pronounce that. Chambered in 30-06, the issue with these is if you fire commercial ammunition, you risk bending the operating rod. A lot of people will tell you, no, that doesn't happen because they did it. Well, it happened to me. It took about 1,000 rounds of modern commercial ammunition, but I did bend the operating rod on an M1 Garand before. Garand, however it is you feel like pronouncing that. So 7.62 by 63, that's M2 ball 30-06, which is what this rifle is designed around. That's a 150 grain-ish bullet, moving at about 2,800 or so feet per second. Now, there are commercial loadings of 30-06 that you can stick in these rifles. You want to update your gas system. There's different versions of updated gas systems that you can throw into these guns to where you can run that modern commercial ammo, and that will send that same 150 grain bullet moving at about 3,000 feet per second, which is significantly faster. It's got more pressure, etc., etc. The sights on these guns, absolutely fantastic. These guns are known to be quite accurate. Normally, the time period, the standard of accuracy for basically all of your military surplus rifles was about 4 MOA. But I have found a good number of M1 Garand rifles that do significantly better than 4 MOA. I'm sure that there are plenty of inaccurate M1 Garands out there, especially since they are getting up there in age and they tend to get a little bit more worn out than some other platforms out there, just because they're semi-auto and they got all sorts of springs and whatnot in there that wear out. On top of that, if you fire a commercial 30-06 through them, the barrels will wear out a little bit faster just because those bullets are moving faster at a higher pressure. So just a couple of different things to look into, but if you have one that works and it works well, then these things right here are stupidly accurate. They're stupidly powerful for what it is that they are. 8 rounds of semi-auto 30-06. I don't think that there's a single scenario where that could not handle a situation. The one thing I don't like about these is they have an exposed bolt right here, and that does lend them to having some issues with like funk and whatnot getting into the system. On top of that, we have this big old opening right here on the back of the receiver that lets dirt, sand, mud, whatever get up into the fire control group. On top of that, it also takes a proprietary in-block clip system, which personally I don't think is that great of a system, but I see why the military did it, and that's a topic for another video. But I think all in all, I don't think that there's a single situation that a United States citizen could come across that the M1 Garand cannot solve. 30-06 is absolutely everywhere. You get yourself an updated gas system for one of these rifles to where you can run basically any kind of 30-06 through these things, and this rifle will serve you exceptionally well. All right, up next, I actually don't have one of these, but we're going to talk about the M14/M1A. I don't have one, so we're going to use my Mini 14 as a go-to here. They're not all that great of rifles, but if you know what you're doing with them, then they can be phenomenally good rifles. So they are semi-auto rifles with an external magazine, essentially designed exactly like this. Chambered in 308/762 NATO, and I get that those cartridges aren't exactly the same, but just for the sake of this particular argument, we're going to go and use them interchangeably. But the big issues with those guns is they tend to have a wandering zero, and it's not necessarily the gun's fault. It's the bedding in the stock has to be done really well. And if you disassemble the gun and take the action in the barrel out of that stock, then stick it back in, you're going to have a zero shift. And that's just the fault of the time period for when the gun was made and how the firearm is actually designed. And if you know how to properly bed your M1A/M14 rifle, then you shouldn't have any issues with a wandering zero. But I think that wandering zero, which is very much a real thing, I think that wandering zero is one of the big falling points of the M14 rifles. On top of that, scopes and scope mounts tend to not be great for those particular rifles. I have seen many times various bolts and whatnot shear off from those optic mounting systems, and I have seen them lose zero just under fire. It's not all that great at holding a scope and an optic and being a good zero. The M1A and M14, they absolutely shine with their iron sights. It's an aperture sight at the rear of the receiver. Then the sights are very similar to that of the M1 Garand. So if you like the M1 Garand sights, then you're going to love the M1A sights. The M14, I get that there's not a lot of M14s out there, but they were actually full auto, and controlling M14 in full auto would be just monstrous. I do not think that anybody, unless you're, I don't know, Hulk Hogan or Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, I don't think that anybody could ever really fully control a full auto M14. I get why the military did it. I get what their mindset was at the time. But just because of all of the negatives of the M14 and all of the little nuances that come into like getting a good proper mounted scope and optic that's not going to lose zero or shear bolts and properly bedding the rifle, etc., etc., I'm going to go ahead and classify that one as a B tier gun. Fantastic guns. You just got to really know what it is that you're doing with them. On top of that, the magazines are like a rock and lock system, and it takes practice to be able to rock and lock a magazine properly into your firearm versus something like an AR where you can just pull the old mag out, put a new mag in. It's just an easier, more ergonomic manual of arms. So, we have one more, and this one is kind of like a genre. Easy A tier. As a matter of fact, I might put these up to S tier. I get that these aren't necessarily military surplus, but they are basically on par with all of what a good number of militaries are fielding to this day if they are using battle rifles as opposed to like a assault rifle style of a firearm in an intermediate cartridge. So your G3 style rifles, your FAL rifles, insert your choice of full power 308 battle rifle here that is a modern style of rifle like your G3 and your FAL. Basically all of them are going to have a box magazine more often than not with 20 rounds. They're going to be relatively heavy but lighter weight than say a BAR, and they're going to be significantly easier to control and maneuver with, and the manual of arms tends to be a little bit better, and the disassembly tends to be a little bit better as well. If you get yourself a modern one, they're going to have a Picatinny rail somewhere on them for a mounting option, or maybe a proprietary option to be able to mount some sort of scope or optic or whatever it is that you want on them. This particular one is a Setme C308, so it was built off of a military surplus parts kit. Some of them can be hit or miss, some of them tend to be wore out, some of them tend to be actually in pretty gosh darn good shape. I know I said we weren't going to do parts kits, but I wanted to include this in this general genre of firearms just because we can't include all the things that we're including so far and not at least bring up a modern military style battle rifle, because these are very much still being fielded to this day. So easy A tier. I might even bump them up to an S tier just because of those external mags that tend to be relatively lightweight in comparison to previous generation magazines. Easy to manufacture. They tend to be absolutely everywhere and relatively cheap. The manual of arms on basically all of your modern battle rifles are pretty gosh darn identical. Magazines go in, you got a charging handle somewhere on the firearm so you can charge your weapon. Some of them are piston driven, some of them are direct impingements, some of them are roller delayed, like for example the G3 pattern Setme C308 that I have here. If you want to mount optic onto this thing, turn it into a DMR or anything like that, you absolutely can do that. I think that just because of the capabilities and the ergonomics of the modern style battle rifle, these would absolutely be placed at like the high S tier. There's a reason why militaries are still fielding these things around the world. Either a high S tier or a high A tier, because I don't think we even have an S tier in this list, but they're definitely above everything else. So there is my list, my tier list of military surplus semi-autos. So I know that there's others out there, but these are just the ones that I have on hand and the ones that I was able to think of. We're going to go ahead, I guess we can include this. It's not a full power rifle, but we'll go ahead and include the SKS rifle. So 7.62x39, absolutely abundant everywhere. And for what most people need a rifle to be able to do, like the 7.62x39 is powerful enough and adequate enough to be able to handle basically everything that a US civilian would ever need to handle. I wouldn't exactly take it shooting at long ranges. Yes, it can be done, but past like 400 yards, it drops like an absolute rock, and you have to really like aim your gun up and mortar those rounds downrange. Now the 7.62x39, although it is a really, really good cartridge for what most people need it to be able to do, it's getting more expensive, and it is getting harder to find just with certain embargoes and certain trade restrictions that are currently being seen around the world. 90% of the 7.62x39 that you're going to find is going to be like cheap steel case stuff. And those tend to have a bimetal jacket. And that bimetal jacket is actually made of steel, and it's a lot harder than, say, a copper jacket. And that really hard jacket is one of the reasons why that ammunition tends to be exceptionally inaccurate. On top of that, there's also powder inconsistencies and bullet weight inconsistencies. So the ammunition for the 7.62x39 can be really good, but typically is not all that great. On top of that, the 7.62x39 SKS, it has a 10-round internal magazine. Yes, you can go out and get more capacity aftermarket magazines, but by that point, it's not necessarily military surplus. It's like modified military surplus. So if we're talking about just the military surplus SKS, 10-round fixed magazine, they feed from stripper clips. You can carry a lot of ammunition on stripper clips with the same amount of weight as you would with like AK magazines. As a matter of fact, I did some math a long time ago. And if you carry ammunition in AK magazines like polymer AK mags and ammunition in SKS stripper clips, you can carry 50% more ammunition in SKS stripper clips than you can that same amount of weight in ammunition from the AK magazines. So good cartridge, semi-auto, 10 rounds, should be able to handle basically anything, but the stripper clips tend to suck. Loading steel case ammunition into the rifle from a stripper clip, it tends to not be that great. It's gritty, it's slow, it's not ideal. In comparison to something like an AK, the SKS definitely falls a little bit short. There's no good way to mount optics to these things without sacrificing your iron sights. The gas system in these things are not great. The gas systems are like, well, I don't want to say that they're not great, but they have a lot of little tiny pieces and little tiny springs in them, unlike something like the AK, which makes the SKS a little bit more difficult to disassemble. There's more things to clean if you fire corrosive ammunition. We're going to go ahead and just classify this one as a B-tier rifle in comparison to something like the AK, which would be an A-tier rifle. This absolutely good enough to handle most of what any of us would ever need a rifle to be able to do, but there's definitely better options out there. So I think that's everything that I want to cover. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garand. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.